Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got Chris on, who works in community management. Hi, Chris.
Hi Daniel, how you doing?
Good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, really well, thank you.
So glad it's Wednesday, almost at the weekend.
Nearly there, yeah.
Chris, should we jump straight in then? Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I work in community management in the games industry. So what that means is I essentially help businesses build communities around their products, or in my case, around games. And what we do is we essentially build communities to give people, the customers of the product or the game, a really great experience. So we offer them lots of content, and we kind of talk to them regularly. But also we kind of work with that community to help guide our decisions as well when it comes to making the games that we make. So we really kind of foster a sense of open feedback, really, where we accept feedback from our players, and we take that internally, and we basically work to make sure that we're doing the right things by them.
Okay, so this sounds like it's a very newish aspect to the industry. Is that right?
It's not that new. It's been around. So I mean, I've been doing it for about 14 years now, and back then it was really new when I kind of started out. I would say there's kind of different forms of it. You may have heard of people who do social media management, for example. That's I guess a kind of form of community management, but it's not super new. It's kind of, like I say, it's been around for a while, I think.
Has it grown as an industry?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Particularly social media management. I think often people will just kind of interchangeably use, community management and social media management as to mean the same thing. In my mind, they are slightly different. Community management is much more about the idea of building up a community of people who are interested in something. They share some kind of an interest. Whereas social media management, I think, can be more about the kind of content that you create. It's more about getting people to interact with your content as opposed to with each other, which you do in a community. But yeah, I think given social media, obviously how popular social media is at the moment, it's definitely kind of an increasingly popular space.
So why do companies, this might sound like a silly question, but why do companies, especially in the gaming industry, look to build these communities? What are they trying to add?
So I think like, first of all, there's a sense of, I mean, to boil it down to its absolute most kind of basic reason for existing, community management really is about creating advocates for your brand, whether that's through helping make sure the game's as good as it can be by taking player feedback and passing it on to development teams and making sure that our games are as good as they can be, or whether it's through providing amazing content outside of the game and kind of extending the experience of the game for people, or whether it's by kind of connecting people together and allowing them to make their own connections with other people, which again extends that experience that they're experiencing in the game. I think those are some of the reasons that we look at community management. And like I say, it all boils down really to making people advocates for us and to making them really happy with what we're doing.
So how did this all start for you then? How did you get into community management?
So I started about 14 years ago or so. So I've always kind of been super interested in the internet. I remember growing up, I was kind of in my, I don't know how old I was, to be honest, but in the sort of early 90s or something like that. It was when kind of the internet wasn't really a household thing. It wasn't particularly vastly adopted by everyone. It was very much emerging. And I remember kind of being just fascinated by the concept of it. And actually, I remember watching a film called Jumping Jack Flash. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No, I've not seen it.
Okay, it's like a proper kind of 80s. I think it's probably an 80s film. It's got Whoopi Goldberg in it, and it's basically about a hacker. And Whoopi Goldberg spends a lot of time in this film talking to a hacker on her laptop. And at the time I watched this, the internet, I don't even know if it, I mean, I certainly didn't even know it existed. So I don't even know if it did exist at that time or not. Certainly wasn't popular. And I just remember being absolutely mind blown by the fact that there was this person talking to somebody somewhere in the world on a computer. It just blew my mind, even though that's the most kind of natural thing you can imagine now. It's so second nature now. It was just a crazy concept to me. And that kind of ignited my interest in the internet, I think. And from there, it was kind of a case of, I finally got the internet, which was amazing. And then I went on to start playing lots of online games, massively multiplayer online games. And I started to join communities in these games and to start to really understand kind of what that means and how enjoyable it can be to interact with people on that level.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I kind of worked. I was working in customer support, and I managed to find myself a job in customer support, but working for one of these massively multiplayer online games. So a game called RuneScape.
I used to play that when
Yeah,
I was younger. Yes.
pretty much everybody I've spoken to either knows someone who's played it or has played it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty popular. So I started working in customer support for RuneScape, but pretty quickly, within about 6 months or so of working there, I moved into community management. And as I sort of touched on earlier, it was very much the early days of community management there. It wasn't really, social media certainly wasn't used in any specific way by companies at that stage. So we were really kind of just figuring out, how do we even do this? There isn't really a rule book. How do we do it? So that was really interesting. And basically from there, I've been working in games and community management ever since, really.
Wow. So did you have any qualifications, or did you do a degree that kind of helped you get into it? Or was it just sort of your love for gaming?
No degree, no qualifications as such that are specific to that. I actually left school relatively early. I think I left at about 17 or 18. I wasn't at the time. I wasn't. I don't think ready to do education. I was kind of really ready to work. I didn't really want to be educated at that stage. So I kind of I was keen to work. So I left school and started working. And to be honest with you, I don't think sort of a formal qualification is really necessary for social media or community management. There are definitely some elements of marketing that are super useful to know if you're going to be a successful CM or social media manager. But I don't think you necessarily need a degree to do that. So yeah, I think experience and having the right mindset is probably the most important thing.
So what's an average day like for someone within the community management space?
It sounds quite cliche, but I think really no 2 days are the same in community management. It's a really sort of broad spanning world, really. So we could be doing everything from content creation for social media. So that's everything from creating assets through to copywriting and planning campaigns and that kind of stuff, right through to reporting on those campaigns and how they're actually going and how they're performing on social media. All the way to things like gathering feedback and sharing that feedback internally, presenting feedback to teams, and making sure that they know what players are saying, through to bug reporting and making sure the games are for high quality. It really is kind of an industry that touches kind of almost every aspect of the business in some way, which is kind of what I really enjoy about it.
So fan feedback is obviously a growing aspect to companies like gaming companies and moving companies. A brilliant example of this is the Justice League Snyder Cut, right? Because fans asked for it. They wanted to see this, and eventually they kind of got what they wanted. Are you seeing this more in the gaming world? People saying, "Hey, we'd like you to tweak the game like this," and our company's starting to listen to that feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of essential, really, nowadays. You can't really go without, but you can't really ignore your customers. It doesn't really work. So you do definitely need to listen. I think there's a real balancing act, which I think is where the community manager comes in and really plays an important part, which is to balance kind of the business's priorities versus the community's priorities, and to kind of understand and digest the feedback that the community are bringing to the table, and then providing that to the game teams in a really succinct way that they can understand and make use of. It's a real balancing act, because like I say, you do have to balance the priorities of the business versus the community. You can't just kind of do everything the community might want, because they may want things that ultimately may not even be in the best interest of them. They may think it'll be great, but it might not actually be a great design decision for the game. So it's a really important thing to balance it out. But listening is absolutely crucial. I think in the industry I currently work in the mobile games industry, and it's an incredibly data-driven industry where there's a lot of focus on kind of how are we performing as a product, how are our products performing, are they making money, are people playing them enough, and stuff like that. So us as a community team being able to bring to that to that mix the feedback that players have and the kind of qualitative side of things, so we can have almost back up the data that we see with that feedback, is I think really important and appreciated by the business overall.
Am I right in saying that as a community manager, as a team in general, you would be responsible for reporting to multiple different kind of departments within the company and explaining the feedback? Is that an important kind of skill to be able to present to people?
Yeah, definitely. Communication is absolutely crucial, verbal and written, and being able to pull together succinct reports that make sense, and not just presenting to different sort of teams within the business, but also different levels of the business. Right up to the very top. So it's really important to be able to kind of harness what people are saying in a very clear way that other people can understand, and really importantly, I think to help them understand what is the impact of what they're saying on the product itself. If we don't listen to this feedback, what might the downside of that be?
So what kind of personality traits do you see in yourself and your colleagues around you that really help you to thrive in this community management space?
I think kind of being really one very important thing, as anyone who's ever used the internet will know, is you need to be fairly thick-skinned. You need to be able to take a certain level of criticism and negativity. It's just part and parcel of it. And I think kind of hand in hand with that is the ability to really empathize with the people that you're talking to. So with any game, or in fact with most things on social media, you will have people who get very angry and negative about things, and it's important to understand that anger and negativity isn't coming from a place of indifference. It's coming from a place of real passion and caring. So being able to empathize with people on that level is super important, because I think if you don't, you very quickly start to just get bogged down in negativity, and you start to kind of lose track of why you're doing what you're doing. So yeah, I would say having a thick skin and being empathetic is super important.
So in general, how does this industry work? So let's take the gaming, for example. Is there a community manager for, say, in larger companies for each game, or do you look after multiple games? How does it kind of really work structure-wise?
I think it depends really on the company. The company I'm at the moment, we have one community manager per game. We have 4 games that are currently live. So that they basically manage everything from social media management through to community management, blog post writing, everything you could imagine. They manage for each of those games. Generally speaking, I would say you would ideally have one community manager per game or per product. It's very difficult. It becomes very difficult to try to manage more than that, particularly if your communities are growing and you have bigger communities. But it isn't rare for a community manager to be responsible for quite a lot, and sometimes that does mean multiple products. So yeah, it really does depend on the business, I think.
And for you, what are some of the biggest positives and opportunities you've had out of working in community management?
I think community management is an amazing, I sort of touched on earlier, it's an amazing place to be because it touches on so many areas of the business. So you get kind of exposure to various departments and various levels of the business that I think other teams probably wouldn't get as much of. So I think I've seen people I've worked with who have gone on from being a community manager to being all sorts of things, game designers, artists, producers, everything you can imagine, really. So it's a really good place to be if you love the games industry and you just want to, or you love the industry that you're in. I guess any industry this would apply to. It's a good place to be because it touches so many elements of the business. But equally, if you're just, you're super interested, like I am, in the idea of building communities, it's a really kind of rewarding place to be, because I think you get to see firsthand what your product means to people. And as I said earlier, sometimes that does mean some negativity, but it also can mean lots of real positivity and passion from people, which is an amazing thing to see. So yeah, I think there are kind of multiple benefits to it.
And on the flip side of that, what's something that's less favorable about the industry?
I would say, I guess, well, as I sort of touched on earlier, the negativity and needing to deal with a certain level of of flack from people sometimes is tough, and it can be quite hard to deal with that, particularly when there are sort of bigger issues with the product you're working on, that people are particularly annoyed about.
You have to have a thick skin, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think you definitely have to have a fixed.
So if anybody's listening and they're thinking, do you know what, I'd really like to have a go at community management, how can they stand out? What can they put on their CV, or what things can they do extra to make them a really, a candidate you'd want to employ?
I think I would say that having a level of a high level of interest in the thing that you're going to be a community manager for is super important. So in my case, games, it could be anything. The reason for that is because, like I say, you're kind of the spokesperson for the company. So you need to kind of be able to communicate to people from a place of true like passion and true interest, and you need to be able to talk to people who are truly passionate and interested and very into whatever it is that you're selling. So I think it's really hard to do that if you're not that interested in the thing you're talking about, right? So I think having a real genuine passion for the thing that you're looking to be a community manager for is really important. I would say also just kind of leveraging whatever experience you've had from being online is really important as well. So whether you've kind of maybe written blogs in the past, or you've I don't know, you've managed social media groups, or you even have an account on social media yourself that has a large following, for example. All of that is good stuff that kind of shows that you have the initiative and the right mindset for doing social media and community management.
Okay, so if somebody's listening, they could either start a blog or start social media, or show a willing, do something outside of their norm, right?
Definitely, exactly that. Yeah.
Sure. So what other industries have community management within it? I know you work in gaming, but are there other places community management is a thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be honest with you, most companies, certainly online companies, have some form of community management. Certainly, social media management. I mean, that will exist in almost any company, because any larger company will have social media presence at the moment. But I mean, as an example, GIFGAF, the phone network, I'm sure you've heard of them in the
Yeah.
UK. They have an amazing community team, and they do a lot of amazing community management work where they kind of really focus on the support side of things. So they harness the power of their community to help support their customers. So they help answer questions and stuff like that, and they get rewarded for doing it. And they've kind of won awards for doing that. They do an amazing job. So it's absolutely something that can work, I think, in any industry. And it's really about, I think, figuring out what is it you need from community. So for games, it's often, like I say, about harnessing feedback and gathering that and making sure you're doing the right things. But for other companies, like GiveGaff, for example, it might be more about customer support and making sure people have a great experience. Elsewhere, it could be about, I don't know, providing crowdsourced documentation around something. It could be all about writing and creating documentation for a specific product or service. So there are lots of different ways that community can be beneficial, but I think it does exist in some form in most companies.
Okay. So at this point, we usually talk about average salaries. So we go away, look for some data, and see if you'd agree. So on average for a community manager, now this isn't specifically in gaming, this is just across the board. It's around 35,000 apparently is the UK average. Does that sit right with you?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably about right. I mean, obviously, depending on where you are in the world, if you're in London, you might be looking at a little bit more than that, maybe. But I would say average, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Mm. Is gaming in general a kind of London centric industry, or is it kind of all around the UK?
It's all around the UK, all around the world. I think London is there are a number of companies in and around London.
Mhm.
Brighton's another place that has quite a lot of gaming, and also in Surrey and Guildford, that's a really big spot for gaming as well. Up there are also companies all throughout the UK as well. There are companies up in Newcastle and Scotland and so on. So yeah, there's a broad reach of gaming companies, but I think the south is, I think, particularly big for gaming.
Mm. So as a somebody that's into gaming, is there kind of something that your kind of dream to work on in the future or something like that?
That's a really good question. I think that's a really tough question to answer, because I think that um, it depends what you mean by by a dream to work on in a way,
Yeah.
because so for me, the most interesting thing to do is almost to work in a place that needs community management the most. So that might actually be, for many people, it might be the most unattractive place to work. It could be like this, they're really struggling on many aspects and actually need somebody to come in to help them build a community so they can really see some benefits from it. So I would say I haven't got any specific examples of where, but anywhere like that, I think is kind of, that's where I really enjoy working, is where you can start to really show the value of community most. I think going into a company that already has a super established, really amazingly performing community team that, they're already knocking out of the park and doing a great job. While that would be cool, it's not as exciting, I don't think, as going somewhere that I think can really benefit from what you're doing.
And what's something that is probably not in the job description, but you have to deal with every now and again?
Something that's not in a job description. I think I would say there's kind of a sense of, I think, being able to remain quite humble, and to not allow your ego to get away with you is quite an important thing in community. You're kind of talking to people on behalf of the business all the time, and in games particularly, people are super passionate about games, obviously. So when they're talking to you, it's really easy to start letting that go to your head and start thinking, oh man, these people love me, about the thing they love, and this is great. But I think that can kind of lead you down the wrong path sometimes, and I think some people can kind of almost go down this kind of this rock star mentality of becoming like the center of attention and losing that focus of what I talked about earlier, which is like this sense of balancing the business's priorities with the community's priorities. It's really easy to start to sort of fall towards the community side, particularly if you're speaking to them a lot and you're really empathizing with them, which again, as I said, is a really important personality trait for a community manager. So I think being able to remain humble, and being able to kind of distance yourself from your ego is super important if you're going to be successful. Because again, also on the flip side of that, if people start being really nasty to you, it's really easy to take that personally. So yeah, being humble and kind of somehow detaching yourself from your ego a bit is important.
So if you were to go in to a company and they sort of didn't have community management, how do you even begin to build a community? What are the steps?
So really good question. I think it kind of depends on what the business is trying to do with the community, or what you think they can do with the community. Like why are you there, for example? So as I said before, it could be there's a need to reduce customer support volumes, or it could be that there's a need for feedback to come into the business, or it could just be that the business thinks there's value in engaging people on social media. So I think first of all, finding out what is it, where can community management really benefit the business is super important. And then from there, I think there's an important element of initially starting out a community is really talking to the people who are your customers or who are your players of your games, and understanding what is it that they would want from a community. What are the things that they currently feel they might be missing by not having a community? And from there, kind of building a solid picture of what the needs are, both on the business's side and on the customer's side, before you start kind of building up a strategy. And then from there, you can kind of decide, okay, we know, for example, we want it to be a support related community where we reduce customer support volumes. Therefore, we're going to need this specific platform for people to talk to each other on and to give support on, and so on. So I think, I think that's how I probably tackle it.
Okay, so there's different aspects to community management that you can focus in on and sort of specialize in.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said before, it's a very broad reaching industry. So generally speaking, most community managers will do all of the elements I've spoken about of community management, but sometimes the focus might be more heavily on one thing. So yeah, again, bringing the support example in, just because your community is really focused on customer support doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to do any social media coverage. It doesn't mean that you're not going to need to do some moderation. It doesn't mean that you're not interested in player feedback or in community feedback. So you have to do all of that, but it's really about figuring out what is the priority and what are the main things that you need to focus on.
So how does somebody begin to progress once they're in community management? What's the kind of steps?
I think I mean, it's really, for me, it's largely about experience. And as I sort of touched on earlier, I think education is great in many ways, and you can certainly learn some really, really useful marketing strategies that can help you with community management. But I think a lot of it is kind of instinct, which comes from experience, which is really, really important. So I think patience is really crucial. Being able to kind of spend time working in community management and kind of just really sort of starting to hone your instincts and hone your understanding of how people interact with each other and with you as a business is very important. And I think by doing that and by building your wealth of knowledge and by working on in different communities and building different strategies, I think over time you will naturally start to progress. I would say also, sort of touching on something I said earlier, I think, which is that there's definitely a sense that community touches on lots of areas of any company that it exists in. And I think, as I said, I've seen lots of people go from community into other areas of gaming. You know, they've become game designers and so on. So I think it's often a route that people sort of find themselves falling into from somewhere like customer support. Potentially they find themselves falling into community management, much as I did, and then deciding, actually, you know what, it's opened my eyes to so many different areas of the business. I want to go in this direction or that direction. So it doesn't mean you necessarily have to stay in community management. It can just be a really great springboard onto other areas of the industry that you're in. But if you are interested in staying in it, I think gaining experience and showcasing that you have a great understanding of how people interact on social media platforms and community platforms is a really great way to progress.
And would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Yes, I would. It's never, basically it's never been boring. I've never had a boring day in 14 years.
Wow.
I've had a lot of very stressful days and a lot of very, really, really happy days. But I've never had a boring day. So it's definitely, I think, coupled with the fact that I'm working in games, which is like I say, an area that really, really interests me. I love it. So yeah, I wouldn't say I wouldn't have done it any differently.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting. It's been really interesting because I literally knew nothing about the industry before.
Oh, no worries at all. I'm glad I could help enlighten you a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's very cool. And where can people find you if they want to, see what you're up to? LinkedIn or something like that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I sort of share things here and there. So yeah, absolutely. Just come and see me on LinkedIn. I'm Chris Hobein.
Brilliant. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
Nice one. Thank you.